Hi class, Maya here, and today we have a very, very special guest. With us is Pedro, Head of Growth and CEO at growthhackers.com, which is the largest growth hacking organization in the entire planet. You won't believe it, but they have 500,000 members. Wow, mind blown. So thanks a lot, Pedro, for being with us and taking us on a growth hacking tour, a little excursion, how big companies are doing that and what are the tools that they are using. Apart from being the CEO of Growth Hackers, what else do you like to do in life?
All right. So thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's like really nice to be talking with all of you guys. Second, just a small correction. I'm not the CEO. I'm currently the head of growth. Emil is our CEO, and Sean Ellis, which is the guy who coined the term, is our chairman, right? So aside from just like running growth for growth hackers, which is a lot of things already, which I usually like on my spare time. I really enjoy to read. I like to climb. I like to kite surfing, and I love my dog.
All right, that's a very good intro into what we are talking about. So, in real life, what usually happens is that people get extremely excited about growth because why not? But then they kind of get stuck on this notion how to apply it. So, you guys have been working with a lot of companies in order to just like introduce growth process at their companies. So, what would you say the best practices are?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, like, first and foremost, the most important thing is for us to start to look at growth as a constant process of experimentation. So a lot of people, when they're just starting out, they might look at growth and think that they just look at that blog post, like how to get traffic, like millions of leads in like 2 days, doing this and doing that. So that might work. I'm not saying that it's not going to work, although probably it's not going to work. So they mistaken, like a lot of people get mistaken by those clickbait blog posts about how to get things done. And growth is more about like the constant process of getting things experimented. So testing everything out before rolling out in a larger scale. So we are always thinking outside of the box. We're taking risks. We're failing a lot of times, but when we get things and when we get it right, it covers all the rest. So it's not the one single test or one single experiment that you are going to run that is going to change your life. It's actually the constant process of doing that with commitment and with consistency. So I think that's like the most important tip that I could give you today.
Yeah, that's a very strong point because usually after the initial enthusiasm and just like this statistical probability that 1 out of 10 experiments will work, some people just like kind of give up too quickly. So it's always important to iterate, to learn from whatever you are doing and just like follow the process. Eventually you'll have a big win, but if there would be someone in growth hacking world that would just like pinpoint what the win for one company is, he or she would be a millionaire and the rest of us would be jobless. So before that happens, we have to follow the process. A very strong point there.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, and like I think like Jeff Bezos and his like last annual shareholders letter, and we're talking about one of the biggest companies in the world here. So we might say that growth is for growing companies or for companies that are struggling or trying to reinvent themselves. But even the ones that are on the top, they're still applying that as a process. And even further, I wish to say like the biggest ones actually have that like the growth mindset internalized into their culture. So in his shareholder, he mentioned that if you know the outcome of something that you are experimenting, it's not really an experimentation. It's just a validation. So like the failure rate of a growth team might be high, but that's because you are taking a lot of risks. You're doing something that have never done before, that no one has ever done before. So it's pretty common for you to fail in that situation. Although you can prioritize accordingly, you can there's a lot like into the process. There's a lot of things that you can do to just like minimize the downside and just maximize the upsides of it. But it's just normal to sometimes fail.
Got it, absolutely. And failing is learning. That's literally it, because with every iteration,
Exactly.
you get so much wiser and you absorb more like market insights, business models. You can then like progress more intelligently, which is always a good thing. But let's be very hands-on here. So what are some practices that help when somebody is just like starting to formulate growth team in their company, or just like to kick off the process? So what are the practical tools and techniques that can help us kickstart this process successfully?
That's a really good question. So I would say that my biggest recommendation is for you to choose one single metric for you to attack. So whenever like one of the main advantages of having a growth team is precisely that flexibility to fluctuate among different departments, right? So what we might be focusing on marketing right now, later on sales, then retention, and then revenue, and then in the product, onboarding, in different growth levers at different times. But you cannot tackle all of them at the same time. And that's usually what they think about when they start. So you're running something like, I'm running an A/B test to optimize the conversion rate of visitors to leads, but I'm also attacking the onboarding process, which goes to the growth lever activation. But I'm also helping the sales team with retention or with revenue, and also the customer service team with retention. So that's just too much. And again, if we take that metric that you mentioned, like 1 out of 10 experiments are actually going to work out. So that means that if you're going to tackle all of those different issues at the same time, you're going to need at least 10 different experiments on sales, on 10 different experiments on marketing, 10 different experiments everywhere for you to get one single thing right. So my recommendation would be map out your funnel, your visitors, your leads, your sales opportunities, your clients, your referrals, everything. Compare that to the market average, or just looking at it, you might find the biggest bottleneck that you have on your funnel right now and tackle that. Get that to be kind of like your main objective, your obsession for the next 2 or 3 months. And then you can run a whole bunch of different experiments to focus on that specific objective. And once you get your target, then you just created a success case. You got more internal company-wide engagement, internal support, and then maybe more resources, more people, more money, more budget, more time for you. Whatever that is, you start to gain company confidence, and then you go into larger and more different objectives at the same time. But my recommendation for companies starting out is choose one single metric and tackle that for the next 1, 2, or 3 months, up until the moment where you get an internal success case, and then you move on to other experiments and other objectives.
These are very, very, very good recommendations, because if you scatter efforts, you're just like everywhere but nowhere at the same time. And it's very important at the job to have a first win in the first 3 months, because otherwise the organization might give up your growth operations. So your job is to bring in at least one win, big win, every 3 months.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you lose on relevance, and we'll dive into how we score ideas later on. But let's just like highlight another important point here. So the majority of people, at least like growth hackers that I know, have this natural attraction to acquisition. So for everybody, it's sexy like to turn on some ads and to do email marketing and whatnot. Whereas in reality, the majority of companies, when they are deep diving into data, find out that activation is broken, as you mentioned before. So what's your recommendation? How do companies prevent themselves from focusing on the wrong metric at the beginning when you have this delicate situation where you're just starting out?
Great. Yeah. That might seem really basic, but a lot of people, I have seen a lot of companies not doing that. So they might be using super fancy and expensive tools, but some of them have not mapped out their funnel yet. So if you don't have at the tip of your tongue the number of visitors, the number of leads, MQLs, SQL, sales opportunities, whatever you want to call it, and clients, that's your funnel. You should have it like without having to look at any file and anything else. You should have it at the top of your mind, at the tip of your tongue. So whenever someone asks, you know precisely the number in each stage of your funnel, and then you can easily see what is the conversion rate of each stage. Based on that, you can compare that to any market average in your industry, or get an expert, or like talk to Maya, whatever that is, and simply know that like just check out what is your biggest bottleneck as of right now. It's I would say that looking at your funnel and comparing that to the market average is the easiest way for you to find out what should be your main objective for the time being.
Yeah, and in addition to that, there are some standard demands. So for example, with apps, it's like onboarding process. With e-commerce, it's usually cart optimization, so cart abandonment. So these are probably like the first thing that we should pay attention at in our funnel, that is. So yeah, apart from the...
Completely agree with you.
Yeah, standard suspects. It's not 100% sure, but there are good fields to look in if you are just starting out. So, okay, now companies have tackled their metric that matters. That's kind of done. How do they iterate ideas, how to fix it, how to improve it? Like, what are the best practices here?
Great, yeah. So from my own experience, growth teams tend to think that creating an idea backlog is their responsibility. Well, it is, but it's not only their responsibility. I think the burden of coming up with new growth ideas should be something shared with the whole company. So, and when you think about it, like your customer service team, your support team are the ones that are on a daily basis talking to your customers. Your sales department and your marketing department are the ones who are talking with potential customers on a daily basis. So if I'm sales rep and I have heard the same question over and over again from like 50% of the customers that I talk to, and they're asking for the same thing, well, maybe I should be listening to that guy instead of just comparing myself with my competitors or doing market research, which is usually where growth teams come up with new ideas. Just talk to your own team. Use their own talent. Use their own resources to come up with new ideas. And that's, I would say that this is also a constant process. It's not a project. Now it's time for everyone to suggest idea. All right, that might incentivize them into participation, but making it easier for everyone in the company to collaborate is the best way to find long-term sustainable growth in creation of a backlog, right?
So yeah, absolutely. Let's just stress here that shouldn't be a one-time workshop, but really like a system of acquiring feedback and just like initiating this feedback loop. So it's not a one-time gig to create this backlog.
Exactly. And I would say that like for kicking things off, an internal workshop, it's amazingly good. It's like it makes a lot of difference down the road. So you might start out asking for people for them to suggest ideas. But what usually happens is once you get to that success case that you have just built, you got your own metric that matters, your objective, that's the metric that I'm gonna focus from now on. And you by the end of the next 2 months, you have actually reached that target. Amazing. What happens then is actually the company starts to perceive the growth team to test new things. So that's when like the coin actually flips, right? Instead of you asking for people to suggest idea, once they see the value of like what the growth team can actually provide, then they are going to be the ones chasing you to actually test something for them. which is great. Is what I believe that every growth team should be expecting. So make it easier for them to collaborate instead of going into your room and actually like suggesting an idea. Integrate something like with a tool that they are used to using, create a formal process of idea suggestion, explain them that there's no downside if that idea goes wrong, but if it goes right, you are going to be like the winner, but you're never going to be the loser if it doesn't work out. So there's no downside, but there's ever upside. And what will eventually happen is that becomes a part of the process and the culture is that everything goes well.
Got it. That was like very well put in terms of how important this interdisciplinary approach is. The majority of companies, at least that I encounter on my exciting growth, does have like a little problem with analytics and just like being systematic about generating user feedback. So I'm recommending them to send some survey, to do usability tests, to systematically grasp customer feedback before we even execute the workshop, because not everybody is like super aware of what's actually going on in the market. And as you are delivering these results, this is such a hidden gem of running a growth operation, because you are really, and I'm totally stealing you this reference, becoming customer obsessed, like Jeff Bezos says it. So yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I'm a very good organization. We can learn a lot of things from them. All right, so now we came into this wonderful, wonderful stage when we have hundreds of ideas. What now?
Great. So the next stage, so the framework is pretty simple, right? Ideation, prioritization, testing, and analysis. So the next step after you create an idea backlog, which again, as Maja has put it, it's a constant process, right? It's not a project. It doesn't start and end. Everyone's going to keep suggesting things as we move forward. The next stage would be actually prioritizing which ideas you should be focusing next. And then we go back to that first topic that we mentioned. If you don't have one single objective, if you don't have one target, one obsession metric, or one metric that matters, whatever you want to call it, chances are you're going to choose or pick tasks that are completely different from one another. They're just going to be everywhere, but nowhere at the same time. So the first suggestion that I would give is find the ideas that are actually going to move the needle closer to where you want to be in terms of that specific objective. You might be like the whole building might be burning, right? Everything, like what normally happens is there's a lot of emergencies and it's just normal to lose focus. But I would I think it's Abraham Lincoln that has a really nice quote. Like, if you give me 3 hours to chop a tree, I would spend the first hour actually just sharpening my chop. So the point is, spend time to actually find the metric that you're gonna focus, and then select the ideas that are actually gonna move the needle in that direction. Regardless of if you have like really good ideas for other things, I would focus exclusively on that. And we recommend, like, we internally use the ICE score, which is a prioritization framework. So ICE stands for Impact, Confidence, and Easy. So that helps us sort all of our ideas out in an easy way. So, for example, let's say right now we are in the middle of September. So my objective was to actually improve onboarding for the quarter. Let's say it. So I'm almost at the end of my quarter. I really, really need to speed things up because I'm not even close to the results that I promised. So I might filter my ideas by the ones that are going to have the highest impact, or the ones that I'm more confident that are going to work out. So that's why the ICE score stands for. Another example is, let's say that your whole product team is focused on launching a new feature, or your company is hosting their annual event and everyone is traveling. So you don't have much resources, you don't have much time. You cannot count with anyone else to actually execute your task. So just filter them out by the highest easy, or the easiest one for you to implement. So that really helps you just like sort all of the ideas out and choose the ones that you should be testing right now.
You are talking real life pains now. You are being
Yes, that's
realistic
true.
standards. Yeah, that's it. Like sometimes life comes in a
That
way
came from my heart.
have the discipline to keep on going. That's basically it, to just like have the discipline to follow the process. It's not
Right.
like that you have to be the smartest person on this planet. You just have to believe in the methodology and making sure that the team consistently develops and feels committed towards making this process turn into something good for a company, which happens, but at the beginning it requires quite a lot of heavy lifting because sometimes people have multiple roles in the company, sometimes they get disturbed by a product launch or go on vacation. But it's your
Yeah,
job
that's
as
a
a
lot
great
of things going
master
on.
to keep the ball rolling. So that's kind of
Yeah.
it. A very good point.
We usually like when companies are doing the onboarding process with us, even though like let's say they have already solved their issue. I mean, they have reached the target for their their objective or their obsession metric. We still do the growth meeting on a weekly basis. Even though if we're not gonna move anything forward, if we're not gonna run any tests this week, we still get together, even if it's to analyze the results of our previous screen, or if it's just to add the new results of our KPIs, we still get together. This needs to become a habit.
Yeah,
Otherwise, whenever
absolutely.
a new emergency comes into the building, you're gonna focus on something else.
It's like
So
training a muscle. You just have to show up in the gym no matter what the weather is. How do you feel like? It's all about the consistency.
yeah, exactly.
Very good
Completely.
point, Pedro. Very good. I'm very enthusiastic about this because right now we are talking real pains.
That's true.
Hey, something else is true. So you mentioned I score, you mentioned growth meetings, and myself, I find a lot of like support and inspiration, and just like it's easier to make the team feel committed if we are using the NorthStar tool that you guys invented in order to support the process. So I have nothing against if my teams want to use spreadsheets or Trellos, but NorthStar is specifically designed in order to support this process. It uses all the terminology that we are discussing right now. It makes you accountable to do growth sprints and just like check metrics on a weekly basis. So it helps you a lot with the discipline, which is especially important when you are just starting out. So could you just like tell us more about the tool, like who's using it? That's kind of your field of work, so go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, sure thing. So, NorthStar was actually born due to market demand, right? So, just as the community was born because growth hackers actually needs a place for to exchange ideas, to exchange knowledge, to ask questions, to brainstorm with uh, like people in a similar position. NorthStar came out of the same thing. Like everyone was applying growth hacking and like the growth hacking process at their own companies, but there is no way for them to standardize the process. And yeah, you can use spreadsheets and you can use Trello and Google Slides, just as like you can do that for your CRM, for example. You don't need a CRM. You can create a CRM on the spreadsheet, but a very few companies do that because sales team already demonstrated their value. So the same happens with growth team. It's normally when they actually show the value that they can bring, like the results that they can bring to the table, and that becomes a part of their culture, then a suitable tool that can cover all of their needs comes in place. So that's NorthStar. NorthStar is pretty much like a growth hacking management tool.
Mhm.
So we actually connect the four steps of the framework that we have been talking about. So we help you create idea backlogs. We help you prioritize those ideas based on IC score, on Pi score. You can connect that with an objective. You can set up your North Star metric, and also the two other steps, which is actually testing things out. So keeping track of everything that you have been testing and analyze. So help you create an idea backlog or a knowledge base with every single thing that you have learned throughout your experiments. So whenever you're just retaining all of that knowledge and avoiding you of doing the same test over and over again. So yeah, that like in a nutshell, that's pretty much NorthStar. And most companies using NorthStar, like our actual customers nowadays, I could say that like IBM it's a pretty good case because when Jason started out with us, they had like 3 or 4 different users. So IBM was exactly like it's kind of the story that we're telling here, right? It was not part of their culture. So it was not like every single product of IBM had a growth team. So Jason actually like took the lead and built his own team for one single product. Nowadays, I believe they have 18 different products and more than 200 users just in the growth team for all of their projects. So it's amazing to see. And if I'm not mistaken, like we're working on a case, but they have brought $25 million in additional revenue just over this past year. So it's amazing what a growth team can do once the culture is standardized. And yeah, we have some other like startups or even big companies, like big companies could be IBM, Spotify is also a customer, Ambev, even the government of Australia has a growth team nowadays.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. Go, this.
Yeah. So like a lot of people tend to think that growth is just for tech companies or B2B app mobile products. It's not. Even if you're a government, you can have that. So they're the live proof that it's not singularly for tech companies or for big tech companies. Although most of the companies like there's startups, but also big companies using NorthStar nowadays. So it really varies from your stage of maturity. But as Sean used to say, once you have found your product market fit, it's already time for you to have a growth team.
Got it. Got it. No, that's spectacular. And I'm seeing this in my practice as well. Teams that commit to using NorthStar are just like so much more likely to stick with the process and have growth meetings and making sure that every week they are absorbing KPIs and metrics. It really helps with the discipline. I personally like to compare it with Fitbit. So we all know that it is good to be active and what could be doing, but it's so good to see these charts with steps and floors and whatever. Like it makes this process so much more pleasurable and enjoyable because like typing some numbers in a spreadsheet is such a dull job, but when you are screen sharing that on growth meeting and just like have everything so nicely display, you look so much more like a pro. And that's like that I wouldn't say that this is gamification per se, but it's a better commitment for people and it's a better usability experience, I suppose. So that always helps, especially in the beginning when people need more guidance. So why don't we take it for a spin, eh?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. Cool. Can I ask you to screen share?
Yeah. Just 1 second while I figure this out.
So next to chat, open conversation, there is a screen share window.
All right, got it.
Brr. And we're in.
You guys in? All right.
Yes, everything perfect.
Perfect. So I'll just take you guys on a tour, and Maya, feel free to just like stop me at any time so we can address any question that you might have or things that you think that are useful. Okay.
I think that I'm being a little bit biased here because I've seen it before, but yeah, I'll try. I'll give it my best.
All right. So basically here I'm logging in on NorthStar. I created this dummy data account so just we can explore things around. And the first thing that like the first stage of this is actually like as Maya and I was just talking about is actually to plan your growth strategy, right? So planning your growth strategy is pretty much deciding your obsession metric, your objective, your one metric that matters, whatever you want to call it. So NorthStar metric and objectives are pretty much the strategic part of your of the whole plan, and that's something that you're probably gonna do once or twice a year. But the rest is pretty much execution, right? So if you're familiar with the growth hacking methodology, like Sean usually suggests that you set up a NorthStar metric. So the NorthStar metric we usually map out an NorthStar metric because this allows the growth team to not only focus on the acquisition side of the funnel, but also expand that into other growth levers, right?
Got it.
So the
But
NorthStar,
sorry
yeah,
for interrupting a little bit, but this
go
North
ahead.
Star metric is a rabbit hole. So it's important to define it, but the process, how to define it is probably like exceed the purpose of this call, but 1 hour or maybe two. So that should be like shared like in a follow-up video or something like that. You're welcome to
Absolutely.
show it, but it's like it literally takes me weeks to figure out what that is for a company. So not something that you should just like make up as you are doing this installation.
Yeah, sure thing. And again, it's not mandatory, right? You can use that, but you can choose not to use that. So some of our customers go straight to the objective. And this one, I would strongly recommend you to use because
Yes.
that's what gives the growth team focus, right? So that's like the obsession metric that we were talking about, or the one metric that matters. So whatever you want to call it, just choose, pick one single objective and just embrace that as your main challenge for the next 2 or 3 months. And up until the moment where you have built your internal success case, right? So you can even schedule some objectives for the future and just leave one in progress. So that allows people to suggest more growth ideas and link that with future objectives. And once the time comes, you can just start executing. Anyway,
So
let's take
sorry,
like
what's
growth.
the best practice here? How much objective should you have? 2 or 3 or 10?
So that, yeah, that's a great question. And that varies based on the amount of resources that you have available. So if you're just like starting out with growth and you have like 2 or 3 people in your team, don't take more than one or two objectives, right? Ideally, once you have your independent team, like let's say you have all the 5 or 6 skills inside of your team, you have independence, your growth PM is actually sitting with the VPs. That means like you have matured enough to have 3, 4 objectives. Like then you can focus on more things at once. But in my opinion, my suggestion would be take a whole year, divide it into four, so 4 quarters, focus on one single metric at different quarters. So for the time being, I'm gonna focus on growing our site user base. The next one is gonna be increasing my weekly active users. The next one could be validate a paid acquisition channel. And then you can set up different time periods. So that will leave one objective in progress, but also objectives that are scheduled to happen in the future. So even if someone else in your company wants to suggest an idea, they can link that idea with something that you're going to be focusing on in the future.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And every week you should review the metrics around this objective. So that's very important to keep track of those objectives weekly.
Exactly.
As you are clicking now.
Yeah. So basically, like for every objective that you create, you're also going to create one or more KPIs, right? So if my objective is growing our user base, or if it's activating more users, or if it's generating more visitors, whatever your main objective it is right now, you can set up a metric goal for that. So in this example, it's a currency, right? Like I'm getting from 0 up to 7,500, but that could be like a percentage. I want to increase the conversion of visitors to lead in X percent. So, or it could be a whole number or a decimal number. That really varies from company to company. Point is, for every single objective that you create, please set up a KPI. Because as a company, I don't expect you to increase the conversion rate of a landing page. I expect you to increase the number of leads that I generate or the number of clients that I have. So the output of your experiments, of your tests are important, yes. But what the company expects from you is not a positive test. It's actually the delivery of this target. All right, so you should always be focusing on the target, not only on the test itself. So that's why we usually suggest for you to set up an objective, because it helps you zoom out of your daily routine, of your experiments on a daily basis, and actually look at the bigger picture, right? Where do we want to get? So that's what is going to show the whole company that we are actually bringing value. No one really matter. Like, it's not going to really matter if you're just improving the conversion rate of the landing page, right?
And so these are the stuff that you put on slides. This is some serious slide material there. It's very good to have this historic traction as you are presenting like results of your growth operation. So please be diligent with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And what this will eventually become is actually like an X-ray of everything that you have done to achieve that main target, right? So if I scroll down a little bit, I can see all of the ideas that have been suggested, all of the tests that I'm currently running, all of the learnings that I have acquired. So even if you want to create kind of like a live reporting tool to the rest of the company or to your director or to the CEO, he can just come in and look at everything that we are doing right now. So that really, it makes it easier for the rest of the company to keep it up to keep the rest of the company up to date about everything that the growth team is doing, right?
Got it.
And in the last layer, we got the ideas, which that is like actually your daily routine, right? So like NorthStar metric and objectives is something that you do once or twice, but ideas, prioritization, tasks, and analysis, that's your reality as a growth master, right? So pretty much like the process of suggesting an idea is pretty straightforward. So I could say that I'm going to create an A/B test for the sign up page. That's going to help me acquire more users. It's straight connected with my objective of growing my NorthStar user base. And I'm going to assign that to myself. So just as we mentioned, we got the IT score. So just an easy way to look at the IT score would be like, for me to run an A/B test on a sign up page, that's something that I can do all on my own. I can just log into my Google Optimize account, set that experiment up, and it's going to be live in 30 minutes. So that's super easy to me to do. Like 30 minutes of one single person, it couldn't be easier. However, I don't have much benchmarks that this is going to work out. We have never done that before, and no one in my industry has done. So I'm not so confident that this is going to work out, right? However, if this works out, what is the impact that this is going to have on my objective of growing my NorthStar user base? It's going to be pretty relevant. So I'm going to leave that as a 7. So my final IT score is 76.7. And like one recommendation that I have about the IT score is that for you not to look at the average as much as you should look at every single element. So like the example that we were talking about, like let's say that you're almost at the end of your quarter and you need to deliver results. You don't look at the average, you look at the highest impact one. So take each element and figure out what is the best test for you to run as of right now.
That's an amazing recommendation. That's kind of a process hack. If I may, maybe at the beginning, people are, let's say, they have different personalities. So some of us are very optimistic and our confidence levels are usually through the roof. Genuinely excited about the discipline, whereas some of our colleagues are a little bit less, optimistic in terms of confidence. So at the beginning, it really helps to spend some time discussing why did somebody score something as they did, to just like kind of establish this common nominator, or even vote like a group to do a couple of ideas, and then kind of get the feel of how that goes for you as a team in your specific team dynamic. So that worked fantastically well in my, hey, everything is awesome, we are very optimistic that this will work scenario.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And then we go back to the like the importance of actually hosting a workshop, or just like having everyone in the company aware of what the growth process is, or what they can expect from you, right? So at first, you're probably gonna have to edit later down the road, maybe like when you're not technical and you require and your idea is for like the product team. The hugest majority of the time, people are gonna think that it's easier than it actually is, right? So yeah, like gathering people together and figuring this out at first, it's a great way. And also a second, like really good way for you to diminish the variation from one idea to another, would be to also create a template for the description and the hypothesis. So those are both customizable fields. So I could just like create a template to what is the idea, how you implement it, and how you will test it. So people would just be answering questions instead of just writing down whatever is on their mind, right? So you kind of create a standard process of idea suggestions, which makes it easier for the growth team on their next step, which is to actually prioritizing things out to find the best ideas, right? Mm-hmm. So both on the description and the hypothesis. And if I can add a recommendation for the hypothesis, try to be as measurable as possible. So if you can bring that down to a number, that would be great. That's not in every case, but the point is, once we go to the analysis side of things, if it's not measurable, chances are that the test is gonna be inconclusive. So if you can narrow that down to a number, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, it is a very good practice to fill in these fields if somebody else is going to execute that specific idea as an experiment. So if not the person who initiated the idea will execute it. So this is a very polite thing to do for your colleagues as well. They will be grateful.
Yeah, and the chances of your idea getting approved also increase if people can understand what your idea is all about. So if you're not in the growth team and you're suggesting an idea and you hope that to be approved, just be crystal clear on what that is all about.
I love this quote, the chances.
And like, just to wrap this up, you can add tags as well. So like I could easily filter this later on, like A/B test, Google optimize. And I could also attach any link that is gonna help me validate these, or it's gonna help my substances to the idea. So once you suggest your idea, that goes straight to your backlog. And here we are with the constant backlog being created, right? So let me just go back to the backlog real quick. And that's pretty much like the first step of the process, right, Maya? Like ideation. The second step of the process is prioritizing the ideas. So what are the ideas that we're actually gonna be running? We usually suggest you to run weekly growth meetings. If it's not possible, run bi-weekly growth meetings, but don't go much beyond that. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna explain the reason behind that soon. But point is, like, prior to your growth meeting, everyone who is participating in the growth meeting, or in other terms, usually the growth team, right, should come to the idea backlog and pick the ideas that they believe are worth testing out. So that again varies with the moment, with the amount of resources that you have, with the content, with the urgency of actually delivering results. So that there's no standard or one size fits it all process of choosing ideas, but what you can do is actually using different criteria. So if I come to the filters right up here, I could say like, again, we are in the end of the quarter, really need to deliver results. So I'm gonna be filtering my ideas by the highest impact one. So the ones that I believe are actually gonna provide the biggest impact on our objective. And then you're gonna see all of the ideas of the highest impact. And there's a whole bunch of different criteria that you can use. So I could filter by growth levers. So if you have mapped out your funnel, again, you could use like activation, acquisition, referral, retention, and revenue, which by the way are customizable fields. So you can just like change the growth levers according with your own funnel. You
Oh,
can
wow,
use
I didn't
tags.
know that.
Yeah, we have actually launched that last
Surprise
week.
every time.
So it's a new feature, but yeah, now you can customize the growth levers according with your own funnel and reflect precisely your customer journey through here. Yeah, and once you find the ideas that you believe are worth testing out, so let's say that I really like recurring onboarding access to projects. So I can nominate this idea for a growth meeting. And by nominating an idea, that basically doesn't mean that this idea is already being tested. It means that this idea is selected for us to discuss during the growth meeting. So it's a two-step approval process. No idea is actually going to be moved to production without we talking about. So once I have prioritized my ideas, so we created a backlog, I'm prioritizing them based on the highest impact, and now it's time for us to run our growth meeting. So when the time comes, you can simply come to the workflow and start your growth meeting right here on the upper right. Right. So basically, I usually run my growth meetings on a 4-step framework. Companies can vary that, like you can adjust that according with your own reality, but I usually spend half of my meeting looking at the past and half of my meeting look at the future. So what I mean by looking at the past?
KPIs.
What is that?
KPIs, metrics, analytics.
Exactly. So we start out by looking at the results of our KPIs. That's going to tell us if we're, again, providing value to the company as a whole. So I usually, like, for every objective that we have or for every KPI that I have someone assigned to that. So I assign that to myself for just like illustration purpose here in the dummy data account. But I usually have the 5 members of my growth team, each of them are responsible for a different KPI. And that doesn't mean that they're singularly responsible for running and executing that, or the failure or success is out him. But that way, you are holding someone accountable for that number. So that makes it easier. Like you can automate this through an integration, right? I could easily integrate this with my Amplitude account, for example. But I'd rather ask them to bring the numbers to the table so we can now look at that and see, all right, so if I keep my line on this, on this angle, I'm not gonna get to the end. But if I keep my line on this angle, I'm gonna get to where I need to be. So whatever you have done, yeah, like whatever you have done whatever we have done on the last week, that actually worked. So let's keep doing that shit again. So maybe roll that out in a larger scale, but that tells me what I should be doing next, right? If
creating the hockey stick.
Yeah, so this tells us what we should be doing, right? And again, if we're providing value to the company, not only to the growth team. That's the first step, right? The second step is to come to the nominated ideas and workflow, and we usually analyze the results of our previous week together. So everything that has been already done will be on the ready to analyze column. That means that you have gathered enough data for you to conclude if that test worked or not. So you can simply click on add test result, say if that worked, if it didn't work, if it wasn't conclusive, share all the lessons that you have learned or the qualitative part of your analysis, or even drag and drop any file or a Dropbox, a screenshot, whatever that is to prove your point, right? If you're doing experiments throughout one of your native integrations, then the data will be automatically available here. Otherwise, simply just add like the lessons that you have learned here and move to your learning. Okay?
Cool. Yeah,
So
there are
this is
some
the
sweet integration. One teams that I'm working with is really bullish on Jira integration. They are using it all the time.
Yeah. So there's two main kinds of integrations, the pull and push integrations. Push integrations are the ones that effectively communicate with different project management tools. So Jira, Trello, Asana, whatever the rest of the company might be using, sometimes they're going to need their resources. So you can just push that card to their own space. And the pull integrations are the ones that automatically populate the results of your experiments inside of a card. So if you're using Google Optimize or Optimizely or Segment, those are all integrations that pull data out of those tools and populate the results inside of your card. So you can just conclude if that worked, it didn't work, if it wasn't conclusive, and add all the notes about it. Right?
Excellent. Yes.
Okay. So now that's the phase where we're looking backwards. For us to look forward now, it's just like simply checking the nominations and pitching them. Sean used to do something with us that I really value, and I think it makes our meetings a lot more productive, which is basically like try to make your meetings as a decision-making meeting, not a brainstorm meeting. So whatever is nominated right here, people will be able to pitch that idea. So you can simply click on the idea and pitch that idea, meaning read the description and the hypothesis. So that's the description, that's the hypothesis. Everyone votes, or your growth master actually decides if it's a good idea. If it is, just test that out. Click on test idea, assign that to someone, and write the hypothesis. So 20% improvement, for example. Right.
Cool. So
another way to do that would
sorry to interrupt, just like to clarify here a little bit. You're saying that Growth Master can help with ideas nomination.
Yeah, normally like the person who nominated the idea is the one that's gonna be pitching. What actually varies from company to companies is the decision if that's gonna be approved or not.
Mm-hmm.
So in some cases, the growth master is actually the one holding it and deciding what goes to the up next column or not. In some others, it's like a voting process. So everyone has a voice and they decided together if something's going to be moved to the up next progress or not. So that varies from company to company. But point is, everyone should have like the space to pitch an idea and decide if that's going to be moved or not. And if that's decided that, all right, that's a good idea, I'm simply going to move that to the up next, choose who is responsible for that, set the hypothesis, or 20% improvement in the conversion rate, and test this out.
Boom. And it's done.
It's done. Now we have to So basically, like the way I look at those columns are like up next is when you're building up your experiment, in progress, you're waiting for the results to come, ready to analyze, you have gathered enough data, and you're ready to conclude if that worked, it didn't work, if it wasn't conclusive, and share the lessons that you have learned through it, right? And also all the other meeting notes that you add will be available right here. So once you end your growth meeting, that automatically creates a summary. And just like a quick recap about the integrations that we have talked about. So basically like Asana, Jira, and Trello are integrations that you can send this information to somewhere else. And Google Optimize or Optimizely or Segment are the ones that you select that experiment and the data comes straight to your card. So then you can automatically populate the results here. You don't have to be using two different tools at once, right?
That's kind of a big advantage as well, because having these data scattered through 4 or 5 different platforms, it makes them less likely to be observed on a frequent basis. So again, a very valuable integration that we can have.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And once you end your growth meeting, so let's say that we didn't send those both ideas to production because we didn't have enough resources, right? So if that's the case, just don't reset your nominations. They will be available here in your next growth meetings. Otherwise, just reset your nominations. They will go straight, they will go back to your idea backlog. And as mentioned before, that automatically creates a meeting recap. So our meeting had 3 ideas nominated, 8 minutes. One idea was moved to the up next. Those are the results of our KPIs, which is super important. And that's all the ideas that are in the up next, in progress, and ready to analyze. Right? So a lot of people that are reporting tool.
And very useful tool for the teams.
Yeah, and like one last step. So we have basically covered the ideation, prioritization, and testing. The last one, which might not seem so important at first, but I guarantee that if you're running, let's say, 5 experiments every week, 15 weeks from now, you're hardly going to remember which test you're running right now. And even less, the results of those experiments. So it's almost impossible for you to keep track of all of that. And that's where the Learning Center comes in. The Learning Center actually helps you retain all of that knowledge and go back to it whenever you need it. So even if it's for research purpose or just like avoiding doing the same test over and over again, that, or let's say someone changed it in your team and you want to bring him up to speed. So that's the place where you go to. Everything has like mapped out if it worked, if it didn't work, if it wasn't conclusive, and it all comes with a shareable link. So you can even send that for the whole company, even if they are not like NorthStar users. So it's a public link for everyone. Like if you're just adopting out growth hacking, my recommendation is share everything that works with everyone in the company. So like I've worked like helped companies before, they created a monthly report about the results of their KPIs and they included a link for every card with things that work. So that really helps to gain momentum and support from people from other departments as well.
Right. Yeah, that's once again a very practical tip that practitioners can give. This is how you move the needle.
Exactly. And just to wrap things up, like the Healthy Center, it's where we look internally. So I could say like how many ideas are being created by my team. So if I see things falling, I can do something to ramp this up again. How many tests are started, learning acquired, weekly team participation, where are we focusing most of our efforts on, acquisition, activation, and also the growth health by week. So who is participating the most testable ideas, most nominations received, most cards completed. That sometimes helps you just create an internal gamification process. So a health competition with your peers, so to incentivize them to collaborating more, right? The calendar is pretty straightforward. It has a different view, but it's like every one of those lines are a different objective of work, and every one of those columns are a different day of the month. So on the 17th, we have an idea created, and we have started a test, and we have sent it a test, so we send a test back. So it really helps you keep track of what you have done in each day of the month and what was that connected to, right? So one common example of this would be like, let's say that you change something, you add a promotion to increase the conversion rate of a landing page, and then you got a new customer based on that. Once that reached the customer service team, the customer service team didn't know about that promotion. So they can simply go back here and see, all right, so on the first week of September, what was going on? So what tests were alive back on that time? So that helps me connect with like something that I might not be aware of. That will all be mapped out right over here, right? So sorry if I speed things up, Maja. I just want to make sure that we had the time to cover it all.
Yes, we did. I think we did, right?
Yeah, I do think so. I
Yeah.
could spend like another hour talking about NorthStar. I think that would be too much. But yeah, like we still have tons of integrations available, ways for you to invite team members. You can have like multiple products or projects at once. So there's a lot of things that you can still customize and do it. But I think we have gone through the main parts of it, like how and like the minimum required for you to cover the four main steps of the process, right? Ideation, prioritization, testing, and analysis.
Awesome. I think it's time to actually wrap it up.
Yeah. Let me just.
I like to conclude by naming the main learnings from the session that we had. So, first main learning for me was that you should focus on one metric, and the way how you find it is to actually map your funnel and have thorough analytics. So, this is how you pinpoint it. The second very strong point was about ideation. So once you find this metric that you should be attacking in your first 2 or 3 months, you gather your team in a room, and not just your team, but as Pedro emphasized, everybody who is relevant in terms of obtaining market insight. So salespeople, customer success people, technology people, whoever can participate. What will happen is that your company will probably come up with a backlog of 70 or 100 experiments and you put them to NorthStar. A very fun job later on is to just like rate those experiments based on IC score. And at the beginning, it's maybe good to do a couple of them together so that a team has sort of a compromise of how that is being done. But the word just starts then, right? So far, you were just learning fundamentals. So Pedro, fill us in. What's the best way how to use NorthStar on a job on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I believe like NorthStar is actually the layer upon any experiment that you are running, right? So that sometimes will be an offline experiment, that sometimes is an A/B testing, other times it will be on analytics, content, SEO, ads, retention, onboarding, whatever that is. So keeping track of all of these is hard, and it's easy to lose focus or lose information. So that's where NorthStar comes in. And as we mentioned, like more than one time during this quick chat, consistency and commitment are two of the most important factors for your growth success. So like NorthStar makes it easier for you to do all of that. But if you have to get one single thing out of this talk, I hope it is to take things serious, right? Like do that on a weekly basis. Get commitment, get your company aboard, focus on one single metric, because we're not saying that it's going to be easy. We're saying that it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And the horizon on which you should evaluate that is 2 or 3 months, not a week or something like that. So everybody, students, you're welcome to sign up for free trial of NorthStar Metric. Take it for a spin, just like see if that tool is complementary to the stage that your company is in. I am using it for several clients. It's a good one. It helps them keep accountable. And it's just like very nice to have this kind of common nominator, just like a compromise, a consensus, how the things go on the growth meeting, because the worst thing that can happen to you, and talking from practices, that people start to brainstorm on growth meetings, especially if you have somebody from the leadership. So that's like hijacking a meeting. And as a growth master, somebody responsible for growth, this gives you like a nice objective argument. So yes, it's very nice to brainstorm, but let's do that outside the meetings. So having structure.
I mean, there is a comment section for that.
Is important. Sorry?
I was just saying there's a comment section for that. There is a Slack integration for that. I mean, Slack is for you to talk. Use that for this.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Eventually, you'll get it. It's very helpful to have an agenda written at least the first couple of times as you are doing it. And NorthStar definitely helps you to get started. So, absolutely zero risk involved. Just take it for a spin. And Pedro, I would like to thank you on behalf of our community, which is a little bit smaller than yours, 500,000 members, wink, wink. But we
We're
are,
getting there together.
yeah, we have to grow as well. It's all about growth. Yeah, so we are grateful for your time and your guidance. We welcome everybody to join Growth Hackers community as well. Amazing stuff there, life learning things. It's one of the most valuable newsletters that I'm subscribed on personally.
So,
Definitely.
thank you for having me again. I hope the time was worth it.